G'day, this is Phil Henderson here. I'm going to show you a quick breakdown of this shot here, which is the birdie, the very first shot of the film with birdie flying off the Busby Street sign. Now, if I turn it from full to about half resolution, it goes a bit fuzzy, but that's just a preview. And if I scroll through, okay, this is the intro. It fades in from black. See birdie tweet. And there's the tweens. Tween is just a short word for in between. So that's a key frame there. And it's actually called key frame as well. So that's a key frame. That's a key frame. And in between, I can scroll through each individual frame to show you what it looks like, which takes in itself about a quarter of a second. So there's the start pose. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now you'll see here, I've repeated the shape of the wing there just to give it a little bit of movement. Now, you see how with the next frame, you'll see how the shape of the body extends. That is called squash and stretch, and that's a very important part of animation. You watch any Roadrunner cartoon and you will see fantastic images of squash and stretch, particularly when the coyote falls off the cliff and you'll see his head stay in camera while the body falls down. That's called squash and stretch. So there's the squash and stretch there. Now that's the next frame, which is the takeoff. And again, you can see here I've got that little flapping thing happening here, but not a lot of repetitive emphasis here because he's not flying that fast. But I want to give the illusion that the wings are going absolutely crazy. Now, here's the little repetition here for giving the image of movement. And so it takes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 frames and he's out of shot. Considering 1 second of footage is 25 frames, and that took 6 frames for him to fly out of shot, like that. That's about a quarter of a second. Now, it's actually quite interesting what I've done. I can, in this, I can actually turn off, see here, that's my birdie layer. And this is a composition within itself. I'll change the colour of that background, it's a bit rude. Composition settings, let's make it white. Okay. Oh, the program I'm using here is called Adobe After Effects. It's a big brother to Photoshop. So we'll go back to the intro. There he is. Now, what I can do is in this birdie thing, I can turn that off. Now, you can see here, I've just put a little burn on there. And that's just a black solid that I've put a mask around. But the mask, the opacity of that mask is 48%. See what I can do there? Turn that off. Now, here's the shadow of the bird. And what this is actually a copy of that shadow, a copy of that birdie file. But what I've done is I've had some effects on it. What I did is I saturated it to 100%. I turned the lightness down to -100. What else have I done here? And I've blurred it 105 pixels. So what you're actually seeing, and this layer here isn't a regular layer. There we go. It's actually an overlay. So the layer itself doesn't sit as an opaque layer over the top of the Busby sign. It's an overlay, so it will influence the colour behind it. And so I haven't got a lot of screen real estate considering it's a 27-inch monitor, but anyway, you get what you're given. See, and I can turn that off and on. Now, this Busby thing was created, and the missus' phone's ringing, but we can leave that alone. Now, if I turn that off, you can actually see the sign that was created in a different layer in Photoshop, and I've exported that in, is on its own layer, because, as you'll see, if I turn the rest of these layers back on, boom, boom, as we scroll through, we have a little bit of a shift there. See that? We changed the perspective of the shot, and what's in the foreground, I wanted to move that out of the way and change that focus. Now, that's not anything to do with camera trickery, although you can program that. It's just a pain in the bum to do it. So what I've done is on the sign, on the effects, I've got a Gaussian blur effect on there, but I've put two keyframes here. So this keyframe here, if I press J, that tells me that the blurriness is set to 0. If I go to the next keyframe, you can see the blurriness factor here rising until we get to that end keyframe, and that's 15.5. So I've blurred this image for 15.5 pixels, which doesn't seem a lot, but you see the effect there. Now, as you can see, I've done the same thing with this sun, the lens flare I've got there, and also the blurriness on the house. So let's just turn this sign off for a second. Now, here's a few things that I've got going on. I've got a shape layer there, which is literally just a circle, because I really wanted to push this nice brightness out in the sun. I'll turn that off. What I've got here is the copy of the lens. I've actually got two of the lens flares. I'll turn both of them off. Now that is my original Photoshop file, but what I can do is I'll turn this lens flare on, and you can see how it's deepened all the colours, saturated everything that's behind it, because I have this on an overlay layer. If it was a normal layer, let me show you what it looks like. See? And that is called a video or photographic overlay. So you can actually download these files, and you see you can got some nice colours in here too. That's what the file looks like. But if I turn it back to an overlay file, I have the light influence of that layer influencing what's behind it, which is in essential what lens flares are all about. And I just duplicated that lens flare to give it an extra kick. There are ways to, there are ways to do it properly, but I thought, forget it. And this lens flare here, you can only see this part of it. I haven't included this part because I didn't want to muddy the shot up too much. Excuse me for a second, I just have to advise people that my missus' phone's ringing. Darl, your phone's ringing. All right. Now, in a little second, you'll get to hear my missus answer a phone. Now, this is the house. If I can, again, I've got that on another layer. You can talk, it's fine. It's all right. Say hello to my class.
Hello, class.
That's Belinda. Anyway, this is the house, and I can turn that off and on, and I'm going to go into Photoshop and show you how I made this. And this is what we start the entire file with. Just a background, again, which I created in Photoshop, and again, you can create this in After Effects, but I prefer the adjustability and the control that Photoshop gives you. So that's it, the start of the shot. There's the house that I've stuck on top with. Again, in a few seconds, I'll go to Photoshop and show you how I made this file. Let's stick that lens flare over the top. Remember, that's an overlay, so it's not that big grey thing that you saw. That's this part of the lens flare duplicated, because I like these two little dots here and what it does for this flare in the sun, but I didn't want all of those big lens flare things happening over here. So you can duplicate it and mask it. Now, that's that shape layer for the sun, remember. Put the sign back there. And this file is called intro, because in my filming file, which is the main file where I composite everything, that intro file crossfades to the first scene where you see Mr. and Mrs. Chifley. I can go through these. If anybody wants to know anything about how I made these files, I'm extremely happy to show you. Feel free to message me, and by all means, I'm happy to put up any of the files that I've created here. I particularly like that, the drop of the pipe and the paper at the same time, which I have on different layers, which is Act 1, right there. And if I open Act 1, his eyes have disappeared for the moment because they were closed. There we go. And you can see here, as my layers end and begin, you can see bang, 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 like that. Oh, actually, this is interesting. This is one thing I want to show you. First is dark yellow solid. Now, what I've done, that's the original file you can see here. That's what I painted. But what I've done is I've made a dark yellow solid, which I can show you here. If I change the nature back to a normal, see, I've got it on a soft light layer there. That's what I made. The mask has a feather on it. See, that's the feather on the mask. If I change that back to 555 and put that back to a soft light, see what it does? That's a very bland sort of skin tone there. But that dark yellow colour glaze that I put over it is actually an oil painting technique, which I use for my oil painting, and it works with video too, which is just amazing. Now you'll see here on the close-up of the radio, which is obviously my object, New South Wales, this is the way that radios used to be built. That's the dial, that's the volume, and this dial was the tuner, so this would go up and down. And in the New South Wales band, this is band 2 in here. And these letters might seem strange until you put a 2 in front of them. 2GB, 2UE, 2BL, which are stations that are still around today. Let's close this for the moment. File, close. Oh, sorry, this is an email conversation between a client. Sorry about that. Now, let's jump back into Photoshop. Right. File, open, documents, CSU. EMA, that's the old 441 files. This is my 442, so assessment 1. Assets, because I always like to make an assets file as opposed to your research here. This is the research that I did for that Bakelite. radio. Now, on Shot 00, I may have even posted this. And yeah, I've gone and flattened all the files. Ah, good one, Phil. Okay. Anyway, so this was the initial sketches that I'd done for my bird. That's what I'll do. I'll actually show you how I made the bird. That's so cool. So I can turn that layer off and on. Sign is on its own layer. Now, what I've done is I actually took a picture of some grass and just laid it out in Photoshop. There's that background. Then again, that's a file of grass. That's a file of wood panellings that I've overpainted and crushed. This is a file of Besser blocks. I could have drawn it, but I was just too lazy. And I've drawn all this, and as you can see, because it's all out of perspective. And that's the kind of aim that I was looking for, something a bit quirky, you know. So let's quit this. Oh, quit Photoshop. Don't save. All right, now let's go back to, here we go. Now, this is called Harmony. This is a brilliant program. This is my 2D animation. Let's go to Birdie. Here we go. Now, so if I start at frame 100, because the naming conventions on this thing are absolutely terrible, and that's something they need to change, because if I start on, say, file 0, these first are named 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, obviously, whereas they should be named 001, 002, 003, because I will end up getting into the 3 digits of my animation frames. So if you've got anything that's under 999 frames, you start it from frame 100, and so on. Okay, now I've broken this down into the shading, into that little jaw bit there, his lower mandible, beak I should say. That's the drawings for the feet, his eyes, and that's the main body there, obviously. What I've done is I've actually dropped that Photoshop file there, sorry, the After Effects snapshot from that single frame, so I know where to put the bird, like there. Now, obviously you can see he's sitting a bit proud, but all I did is after I rendered the film, I just tilted the whole thing like 3 degrees to the left, excuse me. Also, what it allows you to do is to put on the audio file here, which is the sound clip that I used. Which includes the chirping noise, which you can see there. You can hear a little bit of Hank Williams in the background. And here is the flapping. Let's have a look closer in here. These little bits in here are the flapping that you can hear. There. Now, I've done it all on different files because what you can do is actually copy and paste assets. So if I, let's do something naughty. Drawing. You can either draw it in vector or bitmap, which is just brilliant. So let's just, what can I do to Birdie here? Let's put a footy jumper on him, shall we? There you go, now he's a Tigers supporter. Although, probably not very nice being a Tigers supporter at the moment, is it? Go Panthers. Anyway, see, and that flashes there because I've only assigned it to the one frame. But what I want to do is, if I want to extend that exposure, just go up to, say, I don't know, before he flies off, say there. And I just extend that exposure by pressing F5. Please work. Yep, there we go. see how the birdie moves there to lift his head. What I can do is actually put on the transform aspect there. Let's put a keyframe there. And I go to the frame where he's extended, which is there. And let's go, say, like that. And let's put that where it should be. And as he goes back to there, I can copy this and paste it back to here. I don't have to animate that V going up and down again. I can just copy and paste the keyframe and it'll do it automatically. There we go. Let's remove this little squiggle we've done. Delete. Save that. Now, my email address is freelanceanimation@icloud.com. So feel free to drop me a line if you want to know anything, or just message me through Edmodo or Interact, and I'll be happy to help you out if there's anything you need to know about programs or manipulation. Yeah. So have a great day, and I'll talk to you soon.